Não faço graça? Vai, amor, faz. Nossa, trem de gostoso.
On a Saturday night in early November of 2023, a 27-year-old Brazilian man named Diego Fonseca showed up at an emergency room in the city of Jatai with his girlfriend, 23-year-old Aely Alves, who had been shot in the face. He claimed that the couple had just been ambushed by a group of armed thieves on motorcycles in a robbery gone wrong. After Alves died from her injuries, Fonseca called her mother, Olesiane Alves da Silva, and vowed to find the killers responsible for her daughter's death. But the story he gave to the police didn't add up, so they detained him for further questioning. During a search of the victim's cell phone, investigators found indisputable proof that Fonseca had killed Aely in the form of a video that showed him pointing a gun at her and pulling the trigger. In the footage, Alves could be heard laughing and talking in a relaxed tone right up until the murder, making it clear that she had no idea what was about to happen. But the on and off relationship was unhealthy, according to the slain woman's mother, who told Brazilian news outlet G1 that Aely was planning to break up with Fonseca the day she was killed. During a previous attempt to end the relationship, Fonseca had threatened to beat and kill her. Olesiane said that her daughter occasionally came home with visible injuries after arguing with Fonseca during the couple's year-and-a-half-long relationship. She also claimed that Aely had been assaulted by Fonseca's ex-girlfriend, who was waiting for her at his home one day when she arrived. Fonseca remains held without bail on a first-degree murder charge. Number 18. Miguel Perez. A keen-eyed witness named Melissa was shocked when she noticed a man filming upskirt videos of a woman with a camera hidden in his sneaker at the Puebla Fair 2024 in Mexico. Determined to capture proof of the culprit's actions, she began recording with her cell phone as the suspect strategically positioned his foot beneath the unsuspecting victim's skirt. As Melissa and her boyfriend approached the woman to let her know she was surreptitiously being filmed, the voyeur realized he had been caught and began walking away. Later identified as a 40-year-old college professor named Miguel Perez, he continued to ignore his pursuers as a pair of police officers got involved. Melissa's boyfriend grabbed Perez by the collar and told the cops that he was recording with his sneakers, then pointed at the man's shoe and urged the officers to take a closer look. The police took Perez into a tent and questioned him, then placed him under arrest. Further investigation revealed that he had previously shared explicit videos in a Telegram group devoted to voyeuristic content. In a video statement, Melissa claimed that the prosecutor tried to settle the matter by urging Perez to pay the victim $590. The woman rejected the offer, and Melissa said that she was speaking up because she feared that the authorities would fail to prosecute Perez if she didn't draw attention to the situation. As news of his arrest circulated, Perez was promptly filed from his job at Benemerita Autonomous University. According to the most recent updates on the case, he was being held in pre-trial detention while awaiting trial. Number 17. Car smashing stalker targets victim's best friend. In April of 2024, a San Diego-based hairstylist and TikToker named Monica Messa posted footage of a man smashing the windshield of her car and slashing her tires, causing over $1,000 worth of damage to the vehicle. She identified the suspect, who fled the scene in a car, as the narcissistic and violent ex-partner of her best friend, Tori Stevens. Meza claimed that the man had been stalking them for years and that Stevens had unsuccessfully tried to obtain a restraining order against him. During a follow-up post featuring both women, Stevens explained that she had only dated the suspect for 9 months. She discovered she was pregnant with his child after their breakup in 2023 and claimed that he hadn't left her alone since. And as her best friend and longtime roommate, Meza naturally became a target as well. In its decision to deny Stevens an order of protection prior to the car smashing incident, the court cited the he-said-she-said nature of the situation. The women hoped that their footage of the suspect vandalizing Meza's car would finally give police the proof they needed in order to make an arrest, and that the court would finally issue a protective order. There have been no updates to Meza's TikTok page since shortly after the incident, leaving the current status of the situation unclear. Number 16. Ricky Stevenson. In January of 2021, a man was seen stomping on a teenage girl's foot and knocking her to the ground with a punch to the face outside a nail salon in Plano, Texas. He proceeded to drag the victim toward a car and forced her into the vehicle as a passerby attempted to intervene. As the attacker rushed over to the driver's side door in an apparent attempt to drive off before the victim could escape, she opened the passenger side door and exited the car. The man ran back over to her and continued to beat her mercilessly as a crowd of horrified onlookers gathered. He forced the victim back into the vehicle, but she managed to escape with help from witnesses. It was later revealed that the young woman was a human trafficking victim who had been held captive by the man in the video, 29-year-old Ricky Lee Stevenson II, for a year. Stevenson reportedly bragged on social media about being a pimp, forced his victims to get loyalty tattoos identifying themselves as his property, and as the security video proves, threatened and harmed them if they tried to escape. After identifying Stevenson as the attacker, authorities charged him with aggravated kidnapping. According to the district attorney, the defendant thought he would get off the hook by making sure the victim didn't show up to testify during his trial. A jury nevertheless found him guilty, marking the first known case of a human trafficker being convicted based solely on witness testimony. Stevenson was sentenced to 59 years in prison and will become eligible for parole in 2050 at the age of 57. Number 15. Serial Car Keying Cyclist. Since late September of 2023, an elderly cyclist has repeatedly keyed the same 3 cars on a specific street in the Australian city of Wollongabba, causing over $10,000 worth of damage to the vehicles. Speaking with the Courier Mail, victim Mick Brown described the culprit as a regular, well-dressed senior citizen. Surveillance footage of the keyings showed the old man slowly riding his bike past the vehicles with his arm extended toward them and a sharp object in his hand. After the initial keying incident in September, the perpetrator struck again 3 months later. In late December, he damaged the cars for a third time in May of 2024. The attacks appeared to be targeted, but none of the victims recognized the suspect or have any idea why he would have a grudge against them. According to the most recent available updates, the investigation is ongoing. Number 14. Tyler Austin Messa. Preston McCone was folding laundry at his home in McDowell County, North Carolina, one night in March of 2024 when his home security camera alerted him to some movement in his backyard. The footage showed a camouflage-clad man pointing an AR-style rifle at the back door while peering inside the home from just a few feet away. Terrified by what he saw, McCone yelled out to his partner, Billy Brooks. The couple initially speculated that the stranger was a police officer who'd come to the wrong house or a troublesome teenager with an airsoft gun, but they realized that he had come there with malicious intentions when they heard the sound of him pulling the gun's trigger. Luckily, the weapon misfired and the suspect fled the scene. Police identified the suspect as 29-year-old Tyler Austin Messa, but it was only after McCone and Brooks posted the footage on social media that they realized Messa had been to their house on several prior occasions over the last few years. During the previous visits, he asked to speak with Brooks' father, who did not live at the residence. Brooks told the McDowell News that Messa mistakenly believed he and his father were involved in human trafficking. Despite there being no evidence to suggest that this might be true, Messa was charged with 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder, 2 counts of trespassing, 2 counts of stalking, and 1 count each of attempting to discharge a weapon into an occupied dwelling and assault by pointing a gun. According to the most recent available updates, he remains held at the McDowell County Jail with bond set at $1 million. From the very beginning of the case, Messa's mental health has been at the center of his court proceedings. According to court documents, he had been hospitalized due to psychiatric reasons in the year leading up to the crime, and there are concerns that he was experiencing hallucinations and an alternate reality at the time of his arrest. Messa's defense attorney filed a motion questioning his client's ability to proceed in court, and the forensic mental evaluation was ordered. The outcome of the case remains to be seen. Number 13. Jose Caro. In September of 2016, a Los Angeles convenience store worker was kidnapped, from her workplace near Exposition Park in broad daylight, as a witness more or less ignored what was happening before their eyes. Surveillance footage from the mini-mart showed the abductor dragging the victim out of the store by her hair as she tried to fight him off. In the video, a mailman could be seen sidestepping the pair and carrying on with his day, generating an outpouring of angry reactions from the community. The postal carrier was shocked to learn that he had witnessed the real abduction, telling ABC7 that he didn't step in because he wasn't sure if the two knew each other or if they were horsing around. The victim triggered the store's silent alarm, but by the time the police arrived, her captor, 28-year-old Jose Caro, had forced her into a Honda Civic and fled the scene. Caro had been stalking the woman for weeks prior to the kidnapping and had reportedly threatened to harm her and her family if he didn't have his way with her. After leaving the convenience store, he drove to a cemetery in North Hollywood, where he said he was going to bury the woman alive. During the drive, Caro held a knife to his captive's throat and swung a hammer at her head. There was no handle on the inside of the car's passenger side door, but the victim eventually managed to escape by climbing out the window and running over to some people who were visiting a relative's grave. Caro was arrested on a laundry list of criminal charges after a brief police chase. In 2021, 5 years after the kidnapping, he pleaded no contest to 2 felony counts of assault with a deadly weapon and 1 felony count each of attempted murder, kidnapping, assault with intent to commit a felony, criminal threats, and stalking. He was sentenced to 22 years in prison but will become eligible for parole in 2035. Number 12. Benton Bayer. When Andrea and Philippe Robinson of Cold Spring, Minnesota, spoke out about racism at their children's school and placed a Black Lives Matter sign in their front yard in 2021, they never imagined that they would be victimized for it by a bigoted stalker. Their lives were turned upside down at the hands of 33-year-old Benton Bayer, who began stalking and harassing them relentlessly, resulting in 18 phone calls to the police over a 2-month period. Andrea obtained a restraining order against Bayer, but the harassment continued. On one occasion, Bayer dialed 911 and falsely accused Phil Robinson of threatening him with a knife. After having her car windshield smashed while the vehicle was parked in her driveway, Andrea bought a doorbell camera. 2 months later, it captured footage of a stolen SUV smashing into the family's house on a Saturday morning. Thankfully, nobody was injured, but the vehicle came to rest just feet away from the living room sofa where some of the Robinsons' children were sleeping. Inside the vehicle, there was a teddy bear hanging from a noose. It was a clear message from Bayer, who had orchestrated the crash by placing a block of granite on the SUV's accelerator. According to court documents, Bayer targeted the Robinsons based on the mistaken belief that his girlfriend had cheated on him with their adult son. In 2022, a jury found him guilty of 7 crimes, including stalking, harassment, and assault, along with several aggravating factors, including that the crimes were motivated by racism. The aggravating factors enhanced what would have been an 84-month prison sentence to 105 months, or a little less than 9 years. Bayer is required to serve at least 70% of his sentence behind bars before he'll become eligible for parole. He argued in an appeal that the prosecution had failed to prove that his crimes were racially motivated, but the ruling and sentence were upheld. Number 11. Robert Havilla. Late one night in July of 2017, Jerome Kennedy heard strange noises coming from above his bedroom at his Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania home. Suspecting there was an intruder in his attic, he called the police. Responding officers questioned Kennedy's neighbor, Robert Havilla, who he shared an adjoining wall and common crawl space with. Havilla denied entering Kennedy's home and no arrests were made. Determined to get to the bottom of the situation, Kennedy installed a surveillance camera in his attic. A few days later, it captured footage that appeared to show Havilla crawling into the attic with a drill and a light. He spent a half hour looking down through a vent that overlooked Kennedy's bed and his daughter's crib. Armed with the disturbing video, Kennedy contacted the police again. This time, Havilla was charged with burglary, criminal trespassing, and stalking. His defense attorney, Anthony Jackson, told the Washington Post that his client had no criminal record whatsoever, and that they're making it seem like a negative situation, but it's not. Jackson seemed confident that the situation would be cleared up, but in June of 2018, a jury found Havilla guilty of criminal trespassing. He was sentenced to 5 years of probation and ordered to pay restitution to the victims. The judge also issued a no-contact order of protection and banned Havilla from accessing the shared crawl space between the properties outside of specific times determined by the court. Number 10. Sarah Sheffer. After mysteriously falling ill in 2023, 38-year-old Matthew Sheffer began to suspect that his wife, 37-year-old Sarah Sheffer, was poisoning him. There were no major problems in the Sheffers' marriage, and as a Christian school teacher, Sarah didn't seem like the criminal type. But Matthew had ruled out every other imaginable cause for his illness, and he always got sick after eating or drinking something that his wife had prepared. The food and drink also had a distinctive, bitter undertaste, and the symptoms Matthew experienced were severe, consisting of confusion, nausea, dry mouth, extreme fatigue, and blurred vision. On at least one occasion, he confronted Sarah about the unusual taste of a drink she made. She reportedly admitted to urinating in the beverage, then claimed that she had put an industrial-strength adhesive in it, only to change her story and deny tampering with the drink at all. Her strange and conflicting response to her husband's concerns only made him more suspicious that he was the victim of foul play. Determined to put the mystery to rest, Matthew installed hidden cameras at the couple's home in Jefferson City, Missouri. Soon enough, they captured footage of Sarah adding something from a bag labeled Lily of the Valley to his smoothie. Lily of the Valley is a popular wedding flower, but the plant is extremely toxic to the human body. The root is especially poisonous and can quickly lead to cardiac arrest or death when ingested. After discovering the disturbing video, Matthew turned the footage over to law enforcement, along with the tainted smoothie, which tested positive for Lily of the Valley root. Sarah reportedly confessed to poisoning her husband, telling police that she was having an affair with someone in Pakistan and planned to move there, although it's unclear why she felt it was necessary to try killing her husband instead of just getting a divorce. She certainly won't be relocating to Pakistan anytime soon, now that she's facing charges of attempted first-degree murder and armed criminal action. The outcome of the case remains to be seen. Number 9. Muhammad Majid P. In March of 2021, 26-year-old Jamie Coots noticed a man in a baseball cap, hooded coat, and COVID mask following her on foot in downtown Vancouver, British Columbia. She began recording him with her phone as he trailed behind her on the sidewalk. At one point, Coots told the man that he was walking too close to her. He remained silent and continued to follow her without slowing down, ignoring her request to back off. Coots didn't want him to know where she lived, but she was afraid to dial 911 and possibly trigger a violent reaction from him. In her attempts to evade the suspect, she walked so fast that she broke a sweat in the frigid spring weather. In the video, the stalker could be seen wiping sweat off of his own face, showing that he was putting a concerted effort into keeping up with Coots. He followed her for more than 30 minutes until she went to a skate park and asked a group of strangers if she could sit with them. The stalker stood nearby for several minutes before finally going away. When Coots walked home, she was terrified that the man would reappear or that he was already following her. She reported the incident to law enforcement and posted the cell phone footage online. Numerous women responded to the post with claims that they or someone they knew had been harassed in a similar fashion by the same suspect. Police arrested the accused stalker, 35-year-old Muhammad Majid P, who had over 30 prior convictions on his record, including 11 random assaults. After learning his history, many people criticized British Columbia's catch and release policy, which allows most criminal defendants to walk free without bail until their trial. A relative of Majid P told the Globe and Mail that he used to be normal, but that he lost his mind after falling on hard times and getting addicted to drugs. The family had tried to help him, but their efforts proved futile. Majid P has been arrested several times since the incident involving Coots, including in 2022 for a racist attack on an Asian woman and for torching a car in a separate incident the very same day. Once again, the court released him without bail, and in August of 2023 he was sentenced to just 1 day in jail for the racist assault? Less than a week later, a warrant was issued for his arrest for skipping probation. He was captured and released yet again, with a set of rules that the court expected him to follow despite his history of doing the exact opposite. Majid P's current whereabouts and the status of his court cases are unclear. Number 8. Joshua James King. During a typical commute home from her job as a dog walker, one night in September of 2020, 29-year-old Andrea Puerta boarded a Metro mover on Miami's elevated commuter train line. The car was empty, giving her an opportunity to relax after a long day. But the young woman's peace and quiet was interrupted just moments later when a large man boarded at one of the stops and viciously attacked her in an unchecked fit of rage. Horrifying surveillance footage showed the suspect punching Puerta repeatedly in the face, throwing her across the train and slamming her against the floor, seat and walls. Puerta tried to shield her face with her hands and arms as her attacker mercilessly pounded her head and body, but it did little to protect her from injury. She had never seen the man before in her life and had no idea why he was hurting her. At one point, the suspect stopped and apologized to Puerta. Just when it seemed like the attack was finally over, he started beating her again. The assault lasted for a minute straight before Puerta stumbled off the train at a stop. She dialed 911 and was taken to the hospital, where doctors treated her for a concussion, a broken rib, a black eye, a fractured jaw, and other injuries. Puerta's attacker, 25-year-old Joshua James King, was arrested just 2 stations down from where she escaped. After turning his aggression toward 2 other passengers, he was charged with aggravated assault. King had vanished from his home in Perry, Florida, several hours before the attacks and had recently shown some concerning behavioral changes, according to his family. Records show that he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of aggravated assault and 1 count of aggravated battery in April of 2024. He was sentenced to 15 years of community control, which is a strict supervision program that is sometimes imposed as an alternative to prison. Number 7. Shawn Lee Brunson. In February of 2023, a traffic surveillance camera in Baltimore, Maryland, captured footage of a stolen Hyundai Sonata blowing through a red light during a high-speed police chase and T-boning another sedan, causing both drivers to lose control of their vehicles. The car struck a pedestrian and crashed into a brick building which collapsed almost immediately upon impact, burying the vehicles in debris. Police rushed over to both rescue and apprehend the suspect, 34-year-old Shawn Lee Brunson, who survived with non-life-threatening injuries. The driver of the car that Brunson hit, 54-year-old Alfred Fincher, died at the scene. Brunson was charged with vehicular manslaughter, criminally negligent vehicular manslaughter, unauthorized removal of a vehicle, driving without a license, and theft between $1,500 and $25,000. During the trial in February of 2024, prosecutors argued that Brunson could reasonably be identified as the suspect in the video based on the bright yellow shirt he was wearing. The defense, on the other hand, claimed that Brunson had been wrongfully charged in a case of mistaken identity, and that the video was not detailed enough for him to be definitively identified as the suspect. The case appears to be ongoing, and records show that Brunson remains in custody. Number 6. Machete wielding madman versus delivery driver. During what began as a typical shift as a food delivery driver in San Jose, California, in February of 2023, Jerry Gonzalez got lost while trying to find an address. As he drove around in search of the customer's home, the impatient driver of a BMW SUV rushed up behind him and laid on the horn while flashing their high beams. Seeing no reason for someone to speed through a residential area, Gonzalez tapped on his brakes, which of course only escalated the situation. Both his front and rear dash cams were recording as the BMW driver rushed in front of him and then stopped in the road. In the video, a man could be seen exiting the SUV, retrieving a machete from the trunk and charging at Gonzalez, who threw his car into reverse and fled the scene. in the face of oncoming traffic. As he pulled into the road, the suspect shattered his window. By the time Gonzalez was able to dial 911, the road rage driver had started to flee in his vehicle. Despite being terrified, Gonzalez wanted to ensure that the suspect was held accountable for his actions, so he trailed behind the SUV from a safe distance while updating the 911 dispatcher on his location. He followed the vehicle into the parking lot of an apartment complex, where the suspect could be seen briefly exiting the SUV with the machete in his hand before getting back into the vehicle and speeding away. At that point, Gonzalez realized that he would be seriously jeopardizing his safety if he continued to follow the SUV. He turned his dash cam footage over to law enforcement, and the video was shared with the public. The suspect was never identified, despite both him and the vehicle being clearly visible in the footage. Number 5. Aaron Contreras. Ethan Rodriguez was playing a video game at his apartment in Dallas, Texas, on a Saturday evening in August of 2023 when there was a knock at the door. He saw a man he didn't recognize through the peephole, so he decided not to answer and went back to his game. Instead of going away, however, the man rang the doorbell. Using the speaker on his doorbell camera, Rodriguez asked how he could help the stranger. The man claimed to be a maintenance worker who was there to check on the apartment's air filters. But Rodriguez knew that this was highly unlikely, since the last time his household had tried getting their air filters serviced, the maintenance department at their apartment complex said that it was the tenant's responsibility. He told the visitor that nobody was home and to come back another day, and once again resumed playing his video game. A few minutes later, the fake maintenance worker returned with a masked man. Armed with guns, they began trying to kick Rodriguez's door in. Rodriguez rushed into another room to grab his gun, then ran back into the living room and fired 13 shots at the front door. The suspects fired 2 shots in return, then ran from the scene. After stepping outside to assess the damage and realizing that some of the bullets had struck the apartment across the hall, Rodriguez was relieved to learn that his neighbors weren't home at the time of the shootout. He was also glad that his wife and baby were elsewhere that day and that he himself was physically unharmed. Using the doorbell camera footage, police identified the phony maintenance man as 30-year-old Aaron Contreras, a repeat offender with a decade-long criminal record consisting of multiple past arrests for robbery and burglary. Following the most recent incident, he was convicted on a deadly conduct charge for discharging a firearm and is serving a 2-year prison sentence. Police have not revealed the identity of Contreras' accomplice or whether the suspect has been arrested for his role in the crime. Number 4. Javar Marshall and Nazir Sheffer. Rochester, New York resident Shawn Lee was at home on a seemingly normal afternoon in June of 2022 when his Ring doorbell camera alerted him to some activity in front of his home. He was shocked to see a wrecked Nissan SUV in his yard. The doorbell camera footage showed the stolen vehicle blowing through a stop sign, taking a turn onto his street at 50 miles per hour, sideswiping a delivery truck and overturning in the street. The SUV proceeded to slide along the pavement on its roof before rolling several more times, eventually coming to a rest on its side right outside Irizarry's home. The moment the vehicle stopped, multiple police vehicles surrounded it, with their lights and sirens on. Later identified as 21-year-old Javar Marshall and 19-year-old Nazir Sheffer, the suspects could be seen pushing out the cracked front windshield and climbing out of the SUV while a throng of cops approached on foot with their guns drawn. By then, Irizarry had stepped outside to watch the chaos unfold, but he promptly went back inside after realizing just how serious the situation was. Marshall and Sheffer attempted to flee on foot, but they made it no further than the next-door neighbor's yard before officers caught up with them and took them into custody. Records show that Marshall is serving a 5-year sentence for a gun charge stemming from the pursuit and will become eligible for parole in July 2026. Sheffer was also charged with gun-related crimes, but updates on his situation have not been forthcoming, leaving the outcome of his case unclear. Number 3. Logan's Dumbest Criminals. A trio of home intruders outside the Australian city of Logan in the suburb of Daisy Hill were so excited about the belongings they were stealing in August of 2017 that they didn't notice the surveillance camera in the corner of the room that was recording their every move. The video showed the suspects rifling through the bedroom of filmmaker Chris Hughes and taking phones, cameras, and laptops. They were all wearing gloves in an apparent attempt to cover their tracks, but none of them were wearing masks. In addition to ransacking the home of its electronics, the thieves stole jewelry and designer handbags belonging to Hughes' wife. After discovering that he had been burglarized, Hughes posted the surveillance footage on Facebook. It quickly garnered tens of thousands of views and an outpouring of feedback, including comments that appeared to be from one of the culprits, who said he wouldn't go to jail because of his age. He also taunted the victims, earning him the nickname of Logan's dumbest criminal. According to news reports, the perpetrators were thought to be responsible for several other recent break-ins and thefts in the area, but it's unclear if they were ever captured. Today's topic was requested by Scott Miller 6270 and Foul-Mouthed Crafts. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. London Phone Thief. A pedestrian was waiting to cross a street in London's South Kensington district early one evening in July of 2024 when a thief approached on an electric bike and snatched his phone right out of his hand in broad daylight. The victim desperately chased after the culprit while the rest of his belongings fell out of his pockets, but was unable to catch up with him. A possible accomplice could be seen trailing behind the suspect on another e-bike in surveillance footage of the theft. This was just the latest example of a growing gadget-snatching trend that seems to be taking over London despite the city's abundance of security cameras. In 2022 alone, 91,000 cell phones were stolen throughout London, amounting to nearly 250 thefts per day. Only 2% of the devices were recovered. Based on social media commentary, it's clear that civilians are becoming fed up with the growing problem. And while many direct their anger at the criminals who are committing these brazen broad daylight robberies, others have been quick to point out that many of the victims do not seem to be paying attention to their surroundings, making them a target for anyone who might want to catch them off guard. If these criminals caught red-handed wasn't enough for you, then stick around till after number 1 for our previous release of When Overly Clingy Partners Go Wrong. Number 1. Matthew Ward. Ilya Kovalchuk was driving along Interstate 24 in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, with his pregnant wife in June of 2021 when the driver of a pickup truck began tailgating their vehicle at an extremely close and unsafe distance. The man behind the wheel, later identified as a 31-year-old off-duty police officer from Desherd named Matthew Ward, was yelling at Kovalchuk to slow down, even though he was already driving carefully due to his wife being pregnant. Kovalchuk tried to distance his car from the pursuing truck, but Ward showed no signs of easing up on his road rage as he held his police badge in the air. Suspecting that the badge was fake, Kovalchuk gave Ward a middle finger, and the already terrifying situation escalated. Fearing a car accident, Kovalchuk eventually decided to pull over for safety's sake. Ward also pulled over, then exited his truck with his badge in one hand and his gun in the other. Determined to protect his wife and unborn child, Kovalchuk also exited his vehicle, marking the beginning of a tense standoff as a growing number of concerned drivers pulled over to watch and film the confrontation. Footage captured by onlookers showed Ward angrily identifying himself as an off-duty officer, while Kovalchuk told him that he had no right to pull him over while off-duty. Ward continued to point his gun at Kovalchuk with his finger on the trigger and yelled that he was on duty 24/7, while repeatedly barking orders to get on the ground. Kovalchuk peacefully disobeyed the commands, and bystanders began yelling at Ward to take his finger off the trigger of his gun while dialing 911 to report the situation. But Ward refused to remove his finger from the trigger until officers arrived at the scene and arrested him for aggravated assault. He resigned from his position with the Desherd Police Department shortly after his arrest. As news of Ward's disturbing behavior circulated, reporters uncovered a concerning history of past incidents involving his explosive temper, including being kicked out of a police training academy for allegedly threatening to kill an employee. According to records, his case was bound over to a grand jury in late 2021, leaving the current status of the case unclear. In the meantime, the Kovalchuks were awarded a $1 million settlement in a civil lawsuit against Ward and the city of Desherd. an American-born public relations professional working in East London, got romantically involved with a co-worker by the name of Mark Weeks in July of 2017. The latter's relationship with Jessica Nordquist was brief, but she became obsessed with the man after it was over. According to law enforcement's subsequent findings, Nordquist bombarded Weeks with messages and contacted his clients claiming he'd assaulted and abused her. She even went so far as to create as many as 20 fake Instagram accounts to post similarly sordid claims against her former partner. The Alaska native's campaign of harassment didn't end there, however. She allegedly purchased a fake baby bump online to deceive Weeks into believing she was pregnant with his child. In February of 2018, Nordquist was arrested and charged with 1 count of stalking and 2 counts of malicious communications. A month before she was due back in court, the woman's cyber-stalking spree culminated in an elaborate kidnapping hoax in which she sent pictures of herself bound and unclothed to family, friends and colleagues, and Weeks himself claiming she'd been abducted by some sort of crime group. Scotland Yard's Kidnap and Modern Slavery Unit assisted police officers with an investigation into Nordquist's kidnapping claims. She was ultimately found safe and alone at a bed and breakfast in the Scottish Highlands. In December of 2018, Nordquist was jailed for 4.5 years as a consequence for her extreme harassment. Upon her release, she was ordered to face deportation back to the United States. Number 6. Aaron Romo. On the afternoon of March the 17th of 2023, police were called to an apartment in the 1900 block of South Union Street in Anaheim, California. Dispatch had received reports of suspicious circumstances unfolding at the residence in question, inside of which officers subsequently found the lifeless body of 24-year-old Mirelle Mateus. The young woman's mother, Alice, had stumbled upon the body first after noticing her daughter was missing and deciding to check the apartment, which belonged to Mirelle's ex-boyfriend, Aaron Romo. The victim's family informed law enforcement that the former couple had a documented history of violence and abuse. In late 2022, Mirelle and her loved ones had even filed for a restraining order from Romo, who'd previously tormented other partners in similar fashion. The 36-year-old man was released from custody on December the 5th in connection with a domestic incident involving his ex-wife, for which he'd been charged with several offenses, including felony counts of corporal injury on a spouse or cohabitant and false imprisonment. While authorities didn't immediately reveal Mirelle's specific manner of death, they did disclose their belief that she was murdered and that her ex was the culprit. Romo was arrested and booked at the Anaheim Police Department detention facility, where he was held without bail on murder charges. Number 5. Dwayne Herel Jr. In the early hours of January the 29th of 2023, Irene Torres was viciously attacked outside the home she shared with her parents in Old Hickory, Tennessee. The 24-year-old was fatally stabbed in the excess of 17 times. After realizing she hadn't come home that night, the young woman's parents reviewed the footage from their property surveillance system. The video recording showed Torres' ex-boyfriend, a former MMA fighter by the name of Dwayne Herel Jr., dragging her body out of view of the cameras. As would subsequently come to light, 28-year-old Herel then stuffed the body into the trunk of his car and drove to his apartment in Bellevue, where he reportedly hid it in his closet. The victim's parents confronted Herel after spotting him on the surveillance footage. Although he initially claimed that Torres was at a hotel, he ultimately confessed to the murder and told them where he'd concealed her remains. The authorities were then notified of the situation and Herel was arrested on murder charges. A police spokesman revealed that in addition to hiding Torres' body in his closet, the suspect had also tossed her purse and his own bloody pants in a dumpster behind a nearby grocery store. The pair had reportedly broken up only a month prior to the murder, according to the victim's sister. Herel was described as having been abusive both physically and emotionally throughout their relationship and had apparently ambushed Torres as she returned home from work that night. During a preliminary court hearing in February of 2023, Herel showed little emotion while appearing before a packed courtroom. As of the latest updates, he was being held in custody without bond. Number 4. Zachariah Anderson. Wisconsin man Rosalio Gutierrez Jr. was last seen or heard from on May the 17th of 2020. 2 days later, having been unable to get in touch with him, the man's girlfriend, Sadie Beecham, swung by his home. She was immediately caught off guard by the patio door, which had been left open. After venturing further inside, Beecham noticed blood all over the furniture, floor and ceiling, as well as a rug that was missing. She called the police, who dispatched officers to conduct a welfare check on Gutierrez. A criminal complaint later detailed how investigators discovered enough blood inside the residence to suggest a lethal amount of blood loss. They also found evidence that a frenzied physical struggle had taken place. Beecham told detectives that she believed her obsessive ex-boyfriend might have been responsible for Gutierrez's disappearance and presumed death. Officers went to investigate the ex, identified as Zachariah Anderson, who reportedly shared 3 children with Beecham. At both Anderson's home and farm, they found smoldering burn pits containing the ashes of a bleach bottle, as well as the man's clothing. Investigators also collected the victim's DNA from the interior of Anderson's work van, which had been scrubbed with bleach. A few days later, a warrant was issued for Anderson's arrest. He pleaded not guilty to each of his charges, which included felony counts of stalking, homicide, and hiding a corpse. During the resulting trial, which garnered considerable attention from the general public, it was revealed that Anderson had been spying on his ex-girlfriend and had grown jealous of her new relationship with Gutierrez. Whenever Beecham's path would cross with Anderson's during the course of their co-parenting, she said he would frequently bring Gutierrez up in conversation. Anderson was also accused of having the couple's daughter accompany him on a drive to Gutierrez's home, where they watched him and Beecham through the window. The man took photos of his love rival's license plate and registration, rang the doorbell, then fled. The month-long trial was fraught with controversy, with allegations of coaching witnesses being fired at both the prosecution and defense. Prosecutors accused Anderson of making hand signals to his daughter as she testified, while Beecham was accused of the same thing by the defense team. In the end, Anderson was found guilty on all charges and was sentenced to a life term for first-degree intentional homicide, with the possibility of extended supervision after 40 years. Anderson was also sentenced to 4 years in prison for 2 counts of stalking and 6 years for hiding a corpse. Number 3. Yenia Sanchez. In late 2022, a former Miami-Dade schools police officer got into trouble with the law in the aftermath of a toxic romantic relationship. 32-year-old Yenia Sanchez had been removed from the force the previous year following an incident in which she armed herself with a gun and knife while threatening to cause herself harm. Then on the morning of November the 4th of 2022, she reportedly used an electric application to track her ex-boyfriend to a home on West 79th Street in Hialeah. There, she confronted her ex, Damian Colon, a 17-year veteran of the Miami-Dade Police Department. The man was off duty when Sanchez rolled up on him outside his house, triggering an argument. The woman eventually pulled out a gun and shot Colon in the head before driving away in a red pickup. Police responded to the scene shortly after 6:30 a.m., whereupon they found Colon in critical condition on the porch. He was airlifted to the Ryder Trauma Center in Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami. Sanchez crashed the truck into other cars multiple times as she made her getaway, before ultimately abandoning it in the area of Palm Avenue and 45th Street. She subsequently fled on foot, dropping her wallet in the process, and was arrested at her home about an hour later. Sanchez confessed to her crimes, which according to police records included attempted murder, aggravated stalking, and leaving the scene of an accident. The authorities later provided some context for Sanchez's attack on Colon. The 2 law enforcement officers had only recently broken up after a 7-year relationship marred by the prevalence of domestic violence. Number 2. Michael Dighton. Englishman Michael Dighton from Newcastle upon Tyne met Sophie Bruce on Facebook in 2014, and the 2 subsequently sparked up a romantic relationship. Things quickly turned sour because of the extreme control Dighton insisted on holding over his girlfriend. In subsequent reports, it was revealed that the man would force Bruce to send him selfies throughout the day to see where she was. He was also accused of forbidding the young woman from wearing makeup and ordering her to delete all of the male contacts in her phone and on social media. There were also indications of verbal and physical abuse inflicted upon Bruce while they were dating. Dighton even allegedly phoned the young woman's workplace to sabotage her relationship with her boss, and sometimes loitered outside the business while she was working. Bruce ultimately ended things with Dighton, who was subsequently dubbed the Selfie Stalker and charged with harassment, for which he was given a restraining order. Nevertheless, the couple were soon back together, and Dighton's domineering pattern of behavior resumed. Between May of 2018 and mid-2019, the man allegedly assaulted Bruce a total of 3 times, leaving her with a perforated eardrum and bruising around the eye. In the pair's climactic altercation, Dyton not only attacked her but also damaged some of her personal items, tossed shoes around the bedroom, and chucked several of her belongings out the 4th floor window. Bruce grabbed her dog and tried to make a run for it, but Dyton pulled her back inside. She was fortunately able to flee while he was distracted. The man later admitted controlling or coercive behavior in Newcastle Crown Court. He was ultimately spared jail time with a suspended sentence that included probation and a 7 p.m. curfew. Number 1. Traman Dylan. Northumbria University graduate Alice Ruggles formed an intense online relationship with an Indian-born British Army soldier named Traman Dylan, who was stationed in Afghanistan. They met in person for the first time in January of 2016, about 3 months after their initial internet encounter. The pair dated for several months, but it was instantly obvious to those close to Ruggles that Dylan was having a negative effect on her mental health. Friends of the young woman described how she went from being a sociable ray of sunshine to being socially withdrawn, with the line of demarcation being the beginning of her relationship with Dylan. The latter allegedly demanded Ruggles' constant attention and isolated her from loved ones. In August of 2016, 24-year-old Ruggles officially put an end to their relationship, but Dylan refused to accept the breakup and heightened his obsession with her. He reportedly hacked her social media accounts to monitor her activities and repeatedly sent groveling messages begging for her to take him back. Upon learning that Ruggles might have a new boyfriend, Dylan's unhealthy fixation on her developed into a nefarious stalking campaign in which he regularly made 5-hour round trips just to knock on her bedroom window and leave gifts on the windowsill. Ruggles got the police involved, at which point Dylan was told by his commanding officers to cease all contact with her. He flouted the orders to send Ruggles a pleading note in the mail, but she declined when asked by the police if she wanted him arrested. Then on October the 12th, Dylan snuck into the young woman's flat in Gateshead, Tyne and Wear. He ambushed her as she was trying on a ball gown and messaging her new boyfriend. It's believed that Ruggles tried to lock herself in the bathroom but was overpowered by Dylan, who slit her throat, then fled the scene with her cell phone. Ruggles' roommate found her shortly thereafter, but it was too late to save her life. The flatmate reportedly named Dylan as a likely suspect, and he was arrested at his barracks later that night. Blood was found on some of his belongings as well as on the steering wheel of his BMW. He told police that Ruggles had died after accidentally stabbing herself in the neck, but was nevertheless taken into custody on murder charges in the spring of 2017. Dylan was found guilty in Newcastle Crown Court and was jailed for life, with a minimum term of 22 years. Thanks for watching. If a part of your life was to be broadcasted on YouTube live every second of every day, would you rather the cameras were always on you inside of your home or outside of your home? And why? Let us know in the comment section below.